I clicked the links for Odyssey and Bitch. You thought you had met the head Karen. My gosh, you have no idea. It's Karens like this who seem to be up against other Karens without realizing that they are actually the apex Karen predator. So she's Kelly Sue De-cant and Bitch Planet recently popped up in the news with the Warren Ellis debacle. And she was making a Kelly Sue De-cant sell comic books. She was in this interview I'll get to. She is saying that when like new people come to a neighborhood, she said something like when 15% new people come to a neighborhood, the people who are already there decide to move further away. And that she was comparing that to the fact that as more POCs and women get into comics, the customer base seems to just be disappearing. And she was blaming the men, or the males, I guess, for not supporting POCs and women who were replacing their fellow tribesmen who were doing things that they actually found was worthy of being paid for. And it says a few different things. Is why would they support people who are not their guys, especially when you consider that the stuff they're putting out there is just absolute garbage. And not to be too blunt, but things are getting very tribal lately. These are not the times to be supporting anyone to the detriment of your guys, especially if they're insulting you at the same time. And that's actually one of the weird things that is finally starting to happen, is that you see all these other groups who are popping up who want to be privileged over other groups, POCs. Then that wasn't good enough, so they had to go to BIPOCs, women, then WOCs, then BLM, then Asian Lives Matter. So when everyone has a group to advance, advocate for their interests, you realize that you also need to do the same. Irish lives matter more to me than BLM because the Irish don't hate me, at least not all of them. You saw what happened to Warren Ellis. He's not going to be the last. He'll spread out. This whole thing will spread out. It always does. And he acknowledged the issue. That was a mistake. You just essentially retired because there's no coming back from that. You're never going to satiate a crocodile. It's a beast. It eats and it grows. And I'm sort of glad that he's getting screwed because it sends a message to other guys who look like him. Get tribal. You can't fight these people on your own. You need a team of millions to support you. Oh, I was listening to a Diversity in Comics video. Why is he always surprised how evil SJWs are? He never seems to quite get it. Like, yes, are you really completely unfamiliar with the history of Bolshevism? They're evil. There's so many articles to read where they, in their own words, will tell you what they think. There's no, we'll get into that. In the near future, the mob is going to pick another target. We're just cleaning out the industry. I agree partially. Guys like this are probably scumbags. Because here's the thing, he and I both know that goth girls, like the ones that I've seen the pictures of, they don't have agency. Yes, they are technically adults. They may enter contracts. They're adults in name only. They needed a husband and kids and both sets of grandparents to settle them down. Yes, it's sexist, I guess, but I mean, so is Mother Nature. Talk to her about every 28 days. A goth girl's ability to make rational decisions is about one half that of a regular adult. But all this is too little too late. It's deck chairs on the Titanic. You're not going to get talented women to replace these cads and bounders, because if women could do what these guys could do, they'd be called J.K. Rowling. Most people in Comicsgate are defending Ellis because they think men and women are equal, but I know that goth girls are a different breed, and plus I'm really sexist. You could get rid of a dozen of these guys. Great. It's all left-wing idiots anyway. Burn them down. I've always said that due process is what separates us from savages, but I don't see SJW saying that. They seem to be all about witch trials. If it's one of our guys who gets accused, fine, we can go to bat for them, but I don't have the energy to defend SJWs who are advocating for this type of witch hunt. It's like, okay, well, now it's your turn over the barrel. I could do cringe comic reviews every day, but because it deals with the algorithm triggering words, the channel will get shadow banned and then it would finally get nuked. And the comics are pretty similar. I'm not joking when I say blonde man bad. I broadly mean Western European, Aryan, Nordic man bad. But for them, Europeans don't have black hair and hazel eyes. Only blonde or red hair is like peak Europa for them. It's funny that Rectum Rodriguez, sexually harassed EVS and nobody said a word about it. Because EVS isn't an SJW. Others in the industry threatened violence against Myers, and the industry ignored it. The truth of the matter is, if the SJW Marxists label you an enemy, they can threaten your spouse and kids, and no other Marxist will reprimand them. Because he's like a shitty person, or like whatever. I know people think that calling them Bolsheviks or Marxists or talking about the roots of Bolshevism and the atrocities is a bit weird. But I sort of want people to know who these monsters are and what they have planned. And I want people to go back and, crack a book on the stuff that happened in 1918, because it's happening all over again. Let me put it this way. Hypothetical situation. If you had a privileged class of person who committed various deletions and snuggles of people, even kids, versus one blonde who uses racial epithets like a sailor, the SJWs would be more concerned over Mr. Blonde N-Bomb, who is funny online, than a POC who deleted a child. There is no placating these people because they are insane. The SJWs still hate Nick Sandman, who was the victim of the alcoholic. They hate him more than the alcoholic who lied about his military service and lied about the event in general. It's like, there are a dozen cameras recording that. CNN also lied, which is why they got sued. There is no appeasement with globalists because their hatred is based merely on genetics. Either you fight them or you lose everything. Anyway, Kelly Sue was trying to explain why the industry was contracting, why men were leaving as customers. Now, Kelly was saying that they just didn't like women, obviously, and POC writers and editors, which might be true or false. It's up to them. But she didn't mention that audiences across the board underbuy POCs and women wrote projects, because that is inconceivable to her and her narrative. The other thing she didn't mention is that as women come into the industry and customers started running, why didn't women customers come in and buy some of these female and POC comics? I assume the goal of POC and women in comics was to get a new fan base of women in POC who want to buy these hate-filled anti-white comics. So why did the new customer base arrive? And let me ask the obvious question. I read your SJW comics, and as a fellow POC myself, who is a member of the LGBTCG community, I know you guys seriously have issues of hatred against blonde, fair-countenanced people. America is a bit over half European now, and those numbers are shrinking fast, so get out there and make babies. But they were like 90% of the comic buyers. Then you started making stories where it's clear that you hate them. So why would they pay for you to be racist against them? Maybe you assumed that your comics would get a flood of female POC customers, but it hasn't worked out that way. All you succeeded in doing is getting rid of the original fan base. The blonde thing is tiresome. There are so many blonde Eastern Europeans and Russians who suffered horribly under the communist atrocities. They still have PTSD, and are also marginalized and oppressed people of color as victims of the Marxists. They see themselves as the bad guys in comics, and they just stop buying them. Eastern Europeans and Russians are already disenfranchised people who suffered under Bolshevism. And other bad actors that I can't mention on YouTube. They are the victims, but in comics, they are evil. It doesn't make sense. Anyway, so this girl wrote this article. She's getting her master's thesis in the study of the comic Bitch Planet, because Clown World. So her and Kelly Sue use a circular reasoning technique where they assume a conclusion and then extrapolate from to form further arguments and conclusions, but they never actually prove the initial conclusion, so it's all built on a house of sand. They never even define the term. They start with a group of people who think that they start with a straw man. They think they're better than other people, if you know what I'm saying, except they never prove it. And the thing is, you can simply use the same technique against them. I believe X, no proof required. It's clearly obvious from the system we live in, and it's sort of moot anyway because it assumes rational arguments. Marxism is a belief system, not something based on logic. You won't rationally explain to them that anti-whiteism is evil. They know they're hypocrites, but they also know that they don't care because they control the media and social media. If we set up our own safe spaces for conversations like Gab, BitChute, Odysee, and various websites that I definitely can't mention on YouTube, they will simply label them Istophobic hate speech. They don't prove it. They don't even define it. The accusation is the proof. And really, it's just a way of saying that these people are the opposition. It's like if you're, I don't know, apolitical or vaguely on the left, and you had a CG guy. You had a YouTube show and you interviewed some CG guy, and you're on Twitter and you're in a vaguely left wing, and they would go on Twitter and tell you like, oh, this is problematic, and then you ask them like, well, do you have what facts and evidence, or what specifically are you referring to? They say he's Myers. I had Myers on the show. I interviewed him. Oh, he's transphobic. Well, what specifically has he done? That blows their tits off, because as soon as you ask for facts, they know that you're not on their side anymore. And honestly, if like you had an honest conversation about it, you go, okay, well, they had an interaction back and forth, Myers and Mags, who threatened to attack people with a baseball bat. So obviously it's a nuanced conversation. It's like, well, is he transphobic, or is Mags just an asshole, a violent asshole? Yeah, but it doesn't matter. They don't want the explanation. They don't want to have the argument. They just know that if you don't back down when they say problematic, they know that you're not their guy anymore. What they do is they make the accusation and they just put it on Wiki or something like that. Comicsgate is an alt-right hate group led by Ethan, who is literally Lucifer in Hugo Boss. Then if you're an artist who wants to jump into Comicsgate because the mainstream is dead because they killed it, you know that you're going to be blacklisted. All because Wiki just called a group with loosely 100,000 people a hate group. Like what? Every single one of us is a hate? What does that mean? The two biggest guys are EVS and Myers, especially EVS. He seems to be growing leaps and bounds every day. How are they istophobic, and how do you define it? They don't have to, because nobody will hold them accountable. They just know that if you don't agree with them, you're not on their side. And on a deeper vein, the Bitch Planet articles, they go into great detail. Let me get to that. On how much they hate European people, which is inconceivable to me, to hate an entire group of people, like with a blanket hatred. That all or nothing approach is bizarre. I mean that. Even our side, it's like we don't hate people we don't hate entire groups like that. I read, but they do, and it's like the moderate right and the moderate left don't understand the far left. I read more and more articles like this, and me and other normies are reaching the simple conclusion: if you hate each other to this extent, based on immutable characteristics, there is no compromise. There is only physical separation. There's a time in American history that America was on this path to becoming tribe Americana. It would have taken hundreds of years to become a tribe, but it was possible. The puppet masters saw this, and they knew they had to destroy it, which they did in the 60s. There is zero chance of getting on the path again. That ship has sailed. A country needs hundreds or thousands of years to just settle in and become what they're going to become. I think as America was getting better personal liberty and rights for everyone, America was a nation, but it has been turned into a commercial zone to be exploited by billionaires, NGOs, banks, media companies, and drug companies. Gee, do you need an anti-anxiety drug or a painkiller? It's like it's a hangnail. I don't know if I need Vicodin for... Anyway, so America now is a mixed, a shrinking European group and a growing Latin group, and the other 20% is filled in by people from all over the world. So in a business sense, it makes selling films, comics, pretty tricky. I look at it rationally. I figure, look at the market that's the biggest two groups, and sell to them, and adjust depending on who your buyers are. Comics decided to try the F Blondie marketing campaign, and so far it's not working out for them. Say, for example, that Warren Ellis situation. What exactly is he accused of? Was it a civil or criminal matter? They seem to be very shifty on definitions, as they are on istophobicism. And by shifty, I mean they define it to mean whatever they want. Essentially, they draw a circle around their tribe and exclude you based on country of origin. Yes, they are racists. They are everything they accuse you of. Gee, Scooby-Doo, pull the mask off. They were the real racists the whole time, which is a sort of a alt-right meme joke, I guess. That normies, it takes normies a long time to get, like, you mean the people that were accusing us of all this stuff are the real? Yes. Get it through your fucking head. Yes, they really are everything they accuse you of. A lot of them are deeply mentally ill, and they themselves will admit that. So the funny thing about De-cant, who presumably is from the bagpipe region of the world, she wrote a story about a bunch of POC criminals. sort of a weird flex, but none of the SJW's dystopian future seems to understand demographics. The future America doesn't belong to Europeans, it belongs to Mexicans. They are the future of America. Everyone gets a vote. It's a democracy. They'll also be the future majority ruling class because they'll simply vote themselves into those positions. I mean, why wouldn't they? In a few years, the anti-blonde hatred is going to just look silly when there aren't any blondes around. It would be like anti-blonde hate in South Africa. You're picking on the victims. And pretty much all this bitch planet comics, and most of their comics in general, are ridiculous straw man's arguments that they're talking about treatment of women that don't happen in a first world America country, but do happen in other regions of the world, like really, really obviously happen in other regions of the world. So they're writing a comic, and it's like, well, what about, I don't know if I can name these countries without just getting kicked the fudge off YouTube, but there's like a dozen countries in that region of the world that have different rights for women than for men. Legally, de facto, and de jure, that never comes up. All the evil people seem to be like Sweden for some reason. Like, that's insane. That's absolutely insane. Like, your argument is the most insane straw man, fruit of the poison tree, poisoning the well. It's just every nonsense, childish argument. You can simply blow it out of the water by going, oh, what about Saudi Arabia? What about Pakistan? What about Nigeria, Somalia? You could name 100 countries that are the highest human rights violation countries on earth. And here's the thing, most shitlords don't actually want to see women abused. They may want to take their voting rights away, but they don't want to see them not be able to be publicly chastised in the street with a stick no thicker than your thumb, Q434, if you want to duck, go, that reference. Most people don't want to actually see women beaten, but there are regions of the world where that is culturally and legally perfectly accepted. Or, most of us, even if you make fun of the LGBT, of which I am a member, so please don't, because I'm very sensitive, they don't want to see the community learn that gravity is 9.8 meters per second squared, and that the ground is not soft. Anyway, I don't know where I was going with this. Like, comment, subscribe, guys. I will see you all on Odysee and BitChute, because I am not long for YouTube. And, I don't know. All right.